welcome back to the Covenant Eyes podcast. Karen Potter here. I am the Director of Relationship Marketing for Covenant Eyes, and I am so glad to be back with you. It's been a minute since we've been in studio, but of course I've got Rob Stoddard joining me as the co-host today. And Rob, it is so good to see you. How are you?
Good, Karen, good. It is good to be back and talking with folks again. So yeah, excited about our guest today and our program. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Today is going to be a really unique conversation because we're speaking with an organization that's actually been around about as long as we have. So, 25 years, like at the advent and the rollout of high-speed internet. I mean, it's just kind of amazing that there's an organization that's been out there alongside us in this battle. I love it. Rob, do you want to introduce who we have joining us?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been partnered together with them for many, many years, which has been wonderful. So our guest today, our ministry guest, is Prodigals International, Steve Delaney and Fausto Estrada. Did I say that correct?
Yes.
Welcome to the Covenant Eyes podcast.
So glad to be here. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Steve, if you would start, just kind of give us a little bit of background on yourself and
Sure.
the ministry and what all that you guys do.
Yeah, so Prodigals International, we began as an extension of a bunch of guys that had gotten together because they had been in a secular 12-step program for sex addiction recovery, Sexaholics Anonymous, and they found that they wanted something that was going to focus on their faith, that was Christian-based. And so through that process, those men gathered together and they began the process of sort of, if you will, creating the curriculum. And for many years, the curriculum was just sort of on paper, right? And they grew very quickly because the original founder of the ministry, his name's Pat Means, who is also a licensed mental health counselor. So Pat founded the ministry back then. And he, in that process, he started to, sort of create a program of recovery that incorporated and integrated a Christian perspective using the 12 steps. And so it's been an amazing journey for us. We started in 2000 and we've been around for 25 years. And so we've been around for a long time.
Excellent. Fausto, if you could tell us a little bit about your role and how you got involved with Prodigal.
Sure. Mine is very simple, I would say. So it all started, probably, I think 4 years ago. I attended to a group. It's to an event called the XCC. And so, I had struggled with addictions for a while. And so, what ended up happening is that I just couldn't find a way to get out of it, right? And so I was trying just to find a way to just get out of that cycle, but I just couldn't. And so what ended up happening is that I got involved with Prodigals. If I share it in a testimonial way, it happened like this. I went to the XCC finding answers, because I was really, really hoping to get rid of this thing. I thought that it could be a thing that you could snap your fingers and then just, get out of it. But it happened to be that it wasn't like that. I was struggling, to get rid of that addiction problem for over 8 years now. So by the time they invited me to the XCC, I have been battling this thing for 8 years. Now, 8 years that I knew of that it was an addiction, because I started, consuming all of this, probably when I was 12. So I just couldn't stop. I just didn't know how. The year I got married, that's the year when, someone approached me and said, hey, that is an addiction. And then, when I got confronted with it and when I got confronted that it was an addiction, I decided okay, I have to deal with it. And I bet you I'm not an addict. And so I'm going to try to stop for a week. And you know what? I lasted 7 hours or 6 hours. So that's when I realized, okay, maybe, it happened today, maybe tomorrow. And then I started noticing that I couldn't go over 8 hours, without having to have that relapse. And so My wife knew about it. We were praying about it. I read books. I went through multiple things. I went through multiple seminars. I spoke to pastors. I thought I had a demon and I had to get, just something, maybe I just need to get that thing out of there. Maybe I have a demon inside and I just need to get it out of my system, and it should just go like that, and it wouldn't work. Nothing would work, and it was just that. It was just I was desperate, and I thought, like, I can get fixed. This has no cure, and I'm a Christian and I don't know how to get better. And so I went to the XCC, and by attending to the event, I happened to meet a guy who I told about this addiction problem, because they have a section in which they talk about the topic of addiction, and he mentioned the program to me. And that's how I got introduced to Prodigals. And so that's where my journey began. I don't know if you want me, like, that's how I started in Prodigals. Now, if you want me to tell you what I do in Prodigals, it's a very different thing. But yeah, that's how I started, and that's how I got to know the Prodigals program.
I love that story, and I really appreciate you sharing your testimony. There's going to be a lot of our listeners that really that resonates with them, and I think that's really beautiful that you're able to share that. I do want to hear about your work, because I think what's interesting is you go into this organization, this ministry, and you get the help and the healing that you're looking for, but you level it up. You take it to the next level. You help them create the 12-step program for the Spanish audiences. Is that correct? The Spanish-speaking audiences?
Okay, yeah. And that's the funny part. So I got into the program and I hated it. As soon as I got in, I hated it. It was miserable. I just, there is not a chance a human being would like something like this. And it's just awful. It was just awful. It was just so much homework. And then the 30 days that you had to stay sober, and then you had to go in. And, my mentor was, I don't know if I can say this in here, but he was terrible. He was awful. He would be demanding, and he was just so much. Oh my goodness. I was just hoping, like, I need to finish this program, and I'm sure, it'll be quick, but it wasn't quick. And that's the thing. That's when I realized, what I do now is I understand myself 12 months ago. Or maybe 2 years and a half ago now. So, because it was frustrating, and my mentor was not helping me in the way I wanted to. I wanted him to say, "Hey, Fausto, yeah, you'll be okay." But no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't easy. So, went through step 1, 2, 3. I liked it. Went through steps 4, 5, and 6. I hated it with my guts. But one thing was real, is that I was getting healed. The minute I got 30 days into sobriety, it was a life-changing experience. Going into 2 months, can you imagine that? It's a man that has been addicted for 22 years, and now he's 2 months sober. And then I'm going into 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, and my wife couldn't believe it.
It's really, I'll jump in just to say that one of the differentiators of our program is the accountability. It's structured. It can be challenging. It's a challenging program. Sometimes we would refer to it as like the last house on the block, so to speak, for men who have tried other programs, other books, other workshops, whatever it might be. That was really one of the things about our, program when it was created originally, is that accountability. Accountability is really key. And our accountability is extremely challenging, as kind of Fausto alludes to. It was, but that was the intent. We wanted to be a program of not only grace, but, tough love as well, right? I mean, it's kind of that balance, because recovery and sexual compulsivity and pornography addiction and infidelity and all of those things that that we know about, those things hold men in contempt. They hold them hostage, and breaking those bonds and allowing Jesus to come and just be with and through that whole process, that's always been our goal, right? To bring the ability for men, for their partners as well. We have a partner program called Partners in Process. Our men's program, by the way, is called Homecoming. Our homecoming program. We have local groups in the state of Washington and Alaska, up in Calgary, Canada, and we also have online program as well. So we have online meetings on Saturday morning for men, and now we have the Spanish speaking group.
That's how it started. I see, and Steve is putting it in a nice way, and but no, it wasn't nice. And tough love, no, that's miserable love. It was just miserable. But the minute I got 10 months into it, and then a year into it, and then a year of sobriety, it was the hugest milestones that I ever seen in my life. I just went, I remember my wife and I sobbing and then crying and unreal. It was just unreal. I was about to lose my marriage. Now my marriage is at the best stage of my life. And then I just see all these many blessings coming out of it. My wife didn't want to have more kids. And then, one day she says like, you know what? I want to go for the third one. We already had 2 boys. I wanted another one. And she wouldn't because of my addiction. And then she said one day, you know what? Let's do it. I'm all in. And that's when the Lord blessed us with twin babies. And now we're like, okay, we're duplicating everything here. So it's fantastic, but it's not enough because it's real. Yes, it's good. Yeah, I mean, I love my sobriety. I'm not gonna lie to you about that. I love my sobriety. Today, I can proudly say that I'm sex, love, lust, and recovery addict, and my sobriety date is February 1st, 2022, which is good. It's 2 years and a half. People might say, "Oh, you're killing it," which is fine, but there is something missing, and that is the component when you see others struggling with the same thing. Okay, because when you see the reality out there, is that I was one of them, and I was a part of this club of people who would consider this not a problem, and would put excuses so we don't have to deal with it and confront it. And that's when the Spanish introduction came to my life. I remember I spoke to someone about it, and that someone in Colombia told me like, "Hey, I think you should do something about it. You should start something." And that's when I spoke to Alex, who was my mentor. Fortunately, Alex spoke Spanish because I was going to become a co-mentor. I needed a mentor for the program. And then Alex, I persuade Alex in a very nice way. And I just told him like, "Hey, you asked me to go through hell, so I could be recovered. And now I'm asking you to be a part of this, thing in Spanish. And you have to do it. You have to do it with me. I have no other Spanish folk to do it." And so okay, but we need money. We need resources to pay for this. And I remember I prayed one day, "Hey, listen, Lord, I need the money, and we need a lot of money to start translating all of this. So what should we do?" And then the Lord provided, and one day, one guy just told me like, "Hey, here's a check. How much do you need?" Like this much, and he just gave it to me, and then we just started from there. And we just called Steve and said, "Steve, we're doing it. It's happening." There's no coming back now, and that's we started recruiting people, and it started happening.
And there's so many, there's so many of those kinds of stories, right, where men who've gone through our program, have had a complete transformation of their life. And I'm sure you've heard these stories before, but, that is, I personally know that story as well. And it, the dramatic shift in your life is amazing. And, I was talking to some folks the other day, about our program. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, and I said, is so much around, porn addiction, sex addiction, compulsivity keeps men at bay from God's kingdom work. Mm. It keeps them at arm's length from his kingdom. It doesn't mean they don't go to church every Sunday. It doesn't mean they're not involved in maybe a men's small group even. But that hidden behavior, it just lurks in the background, and it obviously keeps them from being fully devoted. It doesn't mean that God's not in their life and God isn't pursuing them. But, at least from my perspective, I don't see it that way. But it does mean that they're not able to fully, if you will, be functioning in the church. and participating in the church and doing God's kingdom work. So I think that is one of the things that, all of our programs of recovery, Pure Desire, Samson Society, Prodigals International, our homecoming group, that's what our goal ultimately is, bringing men back into the fold, if you will, instead of sitting on the back pew, sort of, hiding.
Yeah. That is the key. I mean, Christ is the answer in this. And our relationship with Christ is the answer. That's where the healing is. So God bless your work. Something you guys have both touched on is that need for accountability, that need for community. Matter of fact, we just saw last week, Barna, I don't know if you've seen these, but Barna released some brand new stats, really interesting things. One that really stood out to me, it said that 84% of porn users reported that they had no one in their life to help them walk through this issue. And so tell us a little bit more. I mean, you've talked a little bit, but the community aspect of your groups, the mentorship, how does all that work? Because this piece and this accountability is so important.
It is core, obviously that commitment to being able to participate not only in the group, because group is a big part of our program, as well as what we call mentorship, which is, generally identified as sponsorship in 12-step world, but we call it mentorship because of the connection that's required, the engagement that's required. And that is the idea of bringing men together. And all of our programs started with groups that were in person, right? In the state of Washington and Alaska and up in Canada. But of course, that has also shifted to online. And that's where it gets much more challenging, right? All of us, all of our programs to some degree offer, Zoom or some sort of an online program where you've got lots of men participating. How do you create community? And that is one of our biggest challenges in our online, because what it's allowed us to do is stretch out across the United States and Canada, right? And even international locations, especially with the Spanish-speaking group, you've got international locations, Latin American countries involved in participating in that. But that creating that community, like, for example, in 2025, that is like our number one initiative, is to create community. You can do it, and I'm sure you know this. I mean, you could use Slack to do things like that. You can have text threads and things like that. But we really want to be able to create and bring together community of men where they're supporting one another, encouraging one another, helping those that are in need right now versus tomorrow or the next day. I got an email that it's a totally different experience when you're able to offer some sort of a community-based app, and that's our that's our number one initiative. And and I know a lot of the other programs are doing that as well, but creating that community piece is absolutely key for us. And we do a lot of work with the local church. And an important aspect of that work with the local church is the, emphasizing the need for community. As a mental health counselor, I have, from the time I became a mental health counselor in 2009, which was a result of getting into Prodigals, honestly, my own recovery and transitioning from high tech, where I was in the software world, and then taking over the ministry in 2006. Oh my gosh, I'm old. But anyway, taking over the ministry in 2006, that is just, that has always been a part, is, that outreach to the church, that outreach and bringing together that community aspect. And I know I lost my thought there, but as a mental health counselor, group is the most powerful way of healing. It is the most powerful way to healing for men. Sitting by themselves, trying to do it by themselves does not work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me ask you guys this, because we believe absolutely in the power of accountability and community and working together in groups. We also believe that having guardrails like covenant-ized software and things is essential to the process as well, because during that, especially during the recovery process, you really need those in place as a catch-all so that, if you do get tempted, you've got that there, and then your accountability partners in place. Talk to us a little bit about how you see software like Covenant Eyes playing a part in that journey?
No, it's massive for boundaries. I mean, you got to set up the boundaries because, I mean, when let's say you're in danger, right? I mean, so you need to know your map. And so the first thing you do is you got to put the massive boundaries. Okay. So you might create 2-3 layers. It depends, on, how your addiction has evolved. And having Covenant Eyes as a first, barrier, that will communicate with someone as soon as you are attempting to release an addictive behavior, it will inform someone in a timely manner, what you're against, and then, it allows the other person to pray for you, to be for you, to call you. And that's when that community, plays out. I think having that, without having that in my life, I don't think I would have completed the program. I wouldn't even have, the opportunity to get into the program.
Yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, our mentors are trained and educated around the need for those tools. I mean, like I said, Covenant Eyes has been a partner for a long time, and that is something that is always carried down and carried forward. With men who are part of our program, is having some sort of accountability on their phone, on their computers, on their iPads, whatever the device is. And it gets more challenging, as you know, because there's so many different types of devices. And but yeah, absolutely.
We've talked a lot about men here today, and Fausto heard your story, but you guys also serve women that are struggling. And as we know, going back to the Barna study, I mean, we're seeing 44% of women now say they're struggling with pornography. And so tell us a little bit about how you are helping women in this struggle also.
So our focus in working with women is working with partners of guys that struggle, who've been impacted by behaviors. We work from a trauma-informed perspective as well. So recognizing that when a partner finds out about their husband's behaviors, because in general it's hidden and they have no idea, and it comes out of nowhere, and then levels them, completely can flatten them. Our Partners in Process is our group program that is a weekly support group for women, and a curriculum that's based on, as I said, trauma-informed care for helping those women start the healing journey, which is a very lengthy journey. A lot of, as you probably know, a lot of impacted partners generally will look at their husband and say, it's your fault, you get fixed. And they themselves don't ever fully deal with the harm that has been caused. And as a mental health counselor, I've dealt with a lot of that, obviously, working with couples. I'm working with the addicts primarily, but a lot of times I'm doing joint work with other counselors that are working with partners. And we are doing a way to bridge that, try to restore and bring that marriage back. And that can be very, very challenging given the deep wounds of betrayal that so many partners experience. I wish that we could save every marriage, but it's challenging. It is very challenging, and the harm and the trauma is deep and profound. So that's the work we do. We also offer a 12-week workshop called Brave Warriors, which is also geared toward helping women in a shorter period of time through the initial process of their betrayal wound. So those are some of the services that we offer.
I am so grateful to hear that you have that available to women, because I think that's often overlooked in the process is the spouse. So I think that's great. Talk to me a little bit about how you partner. You mentioned this briefly, partnering with churches, because I think at the end of the day, even Covenant Eyes, we're software, we're online, everything. We develop community within our platforms as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we really want to drive people back to those in-person, local community relationships in their local churches, because in person is just always better. So how do you guys facilitate kind of helping your guys make that transition to where they can get connected into a local body where they can find that additional support ongoing for the rest of their life?
In my church, it was very easy. I just went to my pastor and said, hey, you pray for me, you preached to me for 5-6 years, and it didn't work, buddy. So I had this program. It does work. So let's make it happen. And that's how we made it happen here.
And that's a lot of, yeah, a little bit blunt. Yeah, Frank.
Yeah,
that's why I
to the point.
love having him on. But the reality is we have to meet with pastors, and, a lot of times they have so many balls they're juggling, especially post-pandemic. I'm sure you've experienced this. It's so much more challenging to get there, to even get them to hear and listen. But a lot of times for us, it's a lot of, just the men that get recovery. And we have 250 to 300 men that are actively in recovery. We've helped thousands of men and a lot of partners as well. And in that particular case, our hope is that as they do like Fausto did, they're able to talk into and bring their journey of recovery into their church and to share that. And that's the extent that we do. We're actually doing right now, it's interesting you bring that up. We're doing a massive direct mail campaign, which, you think direct mail, who does direct mail anymore? Well, sometimes the only way you can get the doors of the church to open is to actually send a piece of mail, actually, because email gets just completely lost. So we're doing a campaign to the state of Washington, the churches in the state of Washington right now, educating them, because I think, it's easy to, post-pandemic, there's been so much turnover, a lot of attrition, things like that have happened in the church. And so, a lot of awareness building, as you know.
Well, for our listeners, guys, how do they find Prodigal International and all your resources, especially Fausto? We at Covenant Eyes, I was telling Steve this earlier, we hear from a lot of Spanish-speaking ministries that are looking for resources in this area. So how do they find that also on your website? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, let me jump in, and then I'll let Fausto kind of talk about the Spanish-speaking side. So our website has a directory of all of our groups, our men's and our women's groups, of course, and has links to our online meetings, both our English-speaking meeting as well as our Spanish-speaking meeting. Prodigalsinternational.org. So it's with an S, prodigalsinternational.org. And they can get a hold of us through the website if they want to, find out more about a group, if they want to, more information about our ministry, and those kinds of things. And so, we're always getting inquiries, as well as for counseling services as well. So, so that's kind of how they can get a hold of us and find out about us. And, with the Spanish speaking group, Fausto, talk a little bit about that,
Yeah, so for the Spanish, what we do right now is under the Prodigals website. We also have a section that takes you to where, our link is for the Prodigals meetings every Wednesday at 7 p.m., Mountain Time. And so for us, we have it in the same website as well, but it is a matter of, going through the website and then finding, the link for Spanish. I saw that they uploaded the video, with the invites for the Spanish speaking folks. The other way I typically do it is we have a phone number. We want to have the phone number there so people can reach out to that phone number, and we can add them to the WhatsApp group. And that's the way you get to connect with the Spanish folks. Yeah.
I love that. We'll make sure that all of those links are in our show notes so that our listeners can take advantage of that. I'm just so grateful for your work and your boldness in sharing the truth about your journey. I think it's important that people realize, recovery is not easy work. Sometimes we go into that thinking, we're just going to get in and get out and this is all be taken care of. And certainly the Lord can work miracles. I'm not ever going to deny that. But most of us, we got to do the work. And I love the rawness of this conversation. I love what you guys are doing. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure, and we hope to have you back again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Of course. Rob, you want to bring us to a close?
Yeah. To our listeners, thank you again for joining us and tuning in. Stay tuned for more and more of our podcast episodes. That's it for today. Goodbye.